This is a stack of stencils, and stencils come in every imaginable size, shape, material, whatever. So I just grabbed a bunch from my files. This is probably the type of stencil that you're most familiar with. It's by Delta, and it's just a flower stencil, and each one of these is meant to be used separately. And it's some thin plastic, and you can buy this stencil at any craft store. These are background stencils that I bought online, and they're meant to just create backgrounds, to create patterns, and you can move these around and connect them together, and like this shape is meant to fit into this shape over here, so you can keep moving it and create larger pieces of background. Same thing with this one. These are letter stencils. You've probably seen these. You can buy them at the hardware store or at some craft stores. I know Hobby Lobby has them in different fonts now. And they're meant to be used to put lettering on things like your curb, but you can use them as lettering for your pieces, but you can also use them to create backgrounds by just laying them down and painting through them to create sort of an alphabetical background. This is a stencil. This is punchinella or sequin waste, and it's what's left behind after oh, this has paint on both sides, but this is actually red mylar, and it's what's left behind after sequins are punched out of the red mylar. You end up with this sheet of mylar that has perfect round holes in it. And a lot of people use this to break up their backgrounds. You can buy this at most craft store. Well, you can buy this at some craft stores. Or you can order it online. Just Google punchinella or sequin waste and you should come up with some. These are hand-cut stencils. They're stencils that I made myself. This one is pretty complicated. It's Frida Kahlo. And I teach a class on how to cut this type of stencil, and in fact I cut this stencil for that class. But it involves drawing a design that can remain connected in places to hold the design in place, and then very carefully cutting it out. And this is just cut from an old file folder, but you can also cut from stencil plastic. They sell blank plastic. These are stencils that were punched using paper punches. And again, old file folders. And I happen to have this same punch in 3 different sizes. So I have the flowers punched in 3 sizes to use as stencils for backgrounds. These are a few masks that I have that I've used in various pieces. These are just heart shapes. And you can see where I've laid them down on a surface and then markered over the edges. The marker is all around the edges, and it leaves behind a heart shape. So I have those in 2 sizes. This is a 2-part mask. I cut this intentionally for a book so that I could have the positive and the negative. So this way I could lay down this one, and the face shape, the profile shape, would be what I applied paint to. And this one, my background would be the face shape, and whatever is beyond her face would be what I painted in. So I like to do this. I like to cut masks and stencils so that they come apart. This is a Dior woman that I cut for an altered book layout, and it's actually the silhouette of a Dior outfit. And somewhere around here I have the corresponding stencil that she came out of, because I just cut her from manila paper. And I have the stencil, which is the open space that she came out of, and I'm not sure what I did with it. I might have trashed it because she is a complex shape, and this section right here wouldn't have remained in the stencil, so that would have been a problem. But again, it's just a mask that I can either trace around, or I can spray color over, or looks like I've sponged color over this a couple of times. Here's a piece that I just finished cutting from a heart that I drew. And I just did this on cardstock. And now this is the stencil and this is the mask. So the difference between a stencil and a mask is that a stencil gives you a shape to paint inside of, like this heart. And a mask gives you a shape to paint around, like this heart. And you'll notice that I'm doing this pretty quickly, and I'm not taping anything down, which is why I've got a little less than heart-shaped piece going on over here. So that's the difference. This is a stencil and this is a mask. Same shape, but two different things. This is a stencil that I've used several times, and I made it by just punching with this paper punch through an old manila folder. And you'll notice that there's a lot of paint all around this. That for me, that makes the stencil better because it seals the manila folder and makes it sort of impervious to warping. So the first couple times you use a homemade stencil, it might be a little squirrely. Just set it aside and let the paint dry, and it will behave better. There are a couple different ways to apply stencils. This is the traditional way. This is a stencil brush, and you'll notice that it's flat. It's designed to be used like this. So straight up and down, and you pounce on the stencil just like this. And it's designed to be used with really thick paint. So you kind of want to dry brush a little bit. I'll show you what I mean. So here's my pink paint, and rather than smashing this on there with it all wet like this, I'm just going to clean it off a little bit so that it's nice and dry. And now I can apply the paint. It's pretty dry. A little bit of paint goes a long way. And traditional stencil paints are actually creams. They're pretty thick. So that's one way. Now, if you don't want to invest in, this is a pretty expensive brush. The poor woman's version of this is a cheap 1/2-inch bristle brush that I got at the paint, or in the paint department of a hardware store. And I'm going to turn it into a stencil brush by wrapping some tape around it. And the key to this is getting it pretty far up on the bristles, just like this. Because you notice that this is a pretty short brush. So this is the cheap version of that. And it does splay a little bit more. The bristles splay out a little bit more. but it works pretty well. And if you feel like your bristles are splaying out too much, if you're not getting a good amount of coverage, just add a little more tape. And once you do this a couple times, you'll know about how tight to make it and how far up you need to go. And always test this out on a scrap piece of paper before you go at it on your actual piece, so that you're not surprised. There you go. So, and then, I think you saw me do this already once, but I'll do it again. There is a sponge. You can apply this with a sponge. And again, kind of dry. I really like this because it gets a nice sheer coverage, just like that. And you can do this also, sometimes I'll do it with a damp sea sponge, which it gives a really soft edge. It's sort of counterintuitive to do that with a stencil because you end up with what's going on here, sort of blurry edges. But sometimes that's the look I want. I want something a little softer than these really hard-edged flowers. I might go in with a sea sponge and do a real soft sort of watercolory effect with my flowers. So that's how to apply stencils. So I have a rose stencil here, and I really only want to use this top rose, and I don't want to do any leaves. So I just used some masking tape, and I'm taped off the areas that I might accidentally overpaint, so that I can just get a nice clean rose impression on this piece right here. The original stencil that I cut, I didn't really care for the how the roses resolved up in her head, so I'm just gonna stencil in some new ones.